Hello everybody, we're going to start a new unit and this unit is called Voyagers. So all of our stories in this unit are about Voyagers. So what do you think the word Voyagers means? Can you define it? Who are Voyagers? Where might they go? If you were a Voyager, what kind of voyage would you go on and where would you go? If you're still not quite sure what a Voyager is, I kind of like to think of like a voyage is kind of like a journey or an adventure. So a Voyager would be someone that goes on journeys or adventures and is quite brave usually because they usually encounter some tragic experience which would make us want to read their stories, but it's unfortunate for them, right? Our learning targets today, I can find the main idea and key details. I can ask and answer questions. Now we're going to have a read aloud. It's on pages 214, 215 in your reading anthology. Please turn to those pages in your book. I'm going to pause it right here so that you could get your books ready. Thanks. Hello, we're back. And we're going to have a read aloud, Exploring Antarctica, pages 214 and 215. Please read along with me. Exploring Antarctica. The continent located at the South Pole is called Antarctica. It is so cold in Antarctica that the land is barren. Only a few plants and animals can survive there. The rough terrain is difficult to travel across. I noticed two words there, barren and terrain. I also noticed that their definitions were included within the sentence. So let's read this again. It is so cold in Antarctica that the land is barren. What are the words? Only a few plants and animals can survive there. So I know that if the land is barren, only a few plants and animals can survive there. It sounds pretty difficult terrain, right? And then that was my second word, terrain. The rough terrain is difficult to travel across. Terrain is difficult to travel across. So I'm thinking terrain sounds like the land. And if we're traveling across it, it would be very difficult. So it must be really rough land. Continuing on. Sir Ernest Shackleton explored Antarctica in the early 1900s. Traveling to Antarctica today would be grueling, but it was even more challenging for Shackleton's crew. They could never be sure whether they were walking on safe, solid ice or dangerous moving floes. That's where the ice flows. Have you guys seen those really sad pictures of polar bears sitting in the middle of a patch of ice in the middle of the ocean? And I think that was a floe. They were probably connected somewhere at one point and then it broke off and then the polar bear was kind of stuck there. So you don't want to be caught on a dangerous moving ice floe. They never knew whether they might fall into a deep crevasse. Some people say crevice. Some people say crevasse. Hidden under the ice and snow. And many times their path was completely blocked by impassable mountains or wild icy seas. Trapped by the ice tells the story of this perilous voyage. Perilous. I want you to stop and think about what perilous means. I'll be right back. Perilous means very dangerous. I bet you were thinking that, weren't you? Hello. Okay, so we're going to build some background. The stories in this theme of voyages all deal with voyages, otherwise known as journeys or travels. So this story, Trapped by the Ice, tells a true story about a voyage to Antarctica, the continent located at the South Pole. Now guys, this took place in the early 1900s. So I want you to just think about some of the technology available in the early 1900s. They were just getting started with cars. and they were pretty primitive, right? They weren't fast like they are now. Paved roads were pretty uncommon because they didn't really need them. They just had mostly horses and buggies. Airplanes, not quite there yet in the early 1900s. In a few years, they will start working on airplanes. But it was a lot different than it was today. And as the Exploring Antarctica story said, it's perilous even today to go to Antarctica. So over 100 years ago, this is very serious. People that went there needed to be super brave, and they needed to be brave and they needed courage and even support for their families because they could be gone a long time. All right, so let's move on now. So what you're going to do now is you're going to take a picture walk and you are going to look through the story of Trapped by the Ice. We're going to take a picture walk before we begin reading, and then you're going to think about what do you notice about the pictures in the story, what predictions do you have about the story, and what text features did you see during the picture walk. So you're going to do that, and you are going to do that independently. And remember our learning targets, I can find the main idea and key details, and I can ask and answer questions. So that's what we're working on. Please do a picture walk, and we will continue when you're finished. Thanks. Okay, hello everybody. I hope you took some time to look at the pictures. I sure did, and boy, it looks pretty grim. I can already tell before I start reading that this is going to have some extremely dramatic points to it. Don't you agree? Let's move on. Okay, guys, so I'm just moving myself over here a little bit. You're going to read Trapped by the Ice, but I'm going to have you stop at page 223. And I'm stopping you for a reason, because I want you to like this story so much that you can't wait to read it tomorrow. So you're going to stop at page 223. Once you're done reading page 223, I want you to answer these questions. Why does the author describe the Endurance as a sad sight? Why do you think the sound of crushing wood startles the men? And why does Shackleton decide to try to pull the loads even though it seems impossible? You're going to use a piece of paper or your iPad to answer these questions. And we will be submitting them to Schoology after the next part of the assignment. This is kind of like part 1, and then we're going to redo part 2. Okay, here we go. All right, here's part 2 of our assignment. It's time for main idea and supporting details. So I'm going to ask that you reread page 223, and this part is just for page 223. What is the main idea on page 223? What are 2 supporting details from page 223? And you're going to write a question. What are you still wondering about as you're reading this story? And I'm going to have you really check. Did you answer your questions in complete sentences? Like, for instance, did you restate the question in your answer? So for number 1, what is the main idea? You don't just say, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's not answering the question. That's an incomplete sentence. So you would say, the main idea from page 223 is, and then you answer it. What are 2 supporting details? 2 supporting details from page 223 are, and then writing a question. Remember, questions always start with a capital letter at the beginning of the sentence. We have proper spacing, and then we end with a, what? Yes, a question mark. We always end our question sentences with a question mark. And you can, again, use a piece of paper or your iPad to answer these questions, and you will submit them to Schoology along with the questions that you already answered. So you just kind of maybe take a snapshot of everything and then submit it to Schoology in the assignment folder, and then your teacher can check it for you. Thanks.